Well, Vision International Lesotho recently held a high-level roundtable discussion on disaster risk reduction and management, and the discussion was intended to create a platform for all the relevant stakeholders to participate and interact in interactive dialogues on the community representative findings on disaster risk management. Now, on the line, we do have European Union Humanitarian Aid Communications Specialist, Mr. Thapelo Tseko, to share some light on the discussion that was held. Now, good evening, Ndate, how are you?
Good evening. I'm very well, and good evening to your listeners this wonderful evening. I hope you're well as well.
We are indeed well, and thank you very much, Ndate. Welcome to Ultimate Radio.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thapelo, as an organization, you believe in communities being better prepared and adequately equipped to respond to all kinds of shocks caused by disaster. What are the community preparedness capacity building initiatives World Vision has in place, and where are they implemented?
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, thank you to your listeners. I would love to kick off by first assuring that World Vision, as an international organization, is mostly child-focused, is a Christian organization, and perhaps implements in the community. That means we are community-focused. And as such, we have different pillars which we use for our implementations, or different programs which we enact as well as implement in those areas. The first maybe being crucial to what we are doing today, or what we did yesterday that we'll be talking about mostly, is advocacy, in which we want to amplify voices, especially those of children, harnessing them to call for what is right, fair and just. That is where we get to hear the children talking about their needs, and they begin to tell us that nothing about the children without the children. And of course, when we talk about disasters, we want to talk about humanitarian emergency affairs. This is where we help children, families, and communities to prepare for, to respond, and to survive beyond crisis. Now, yesterday's high-level table, or to answer your question, I would love to kick off by saying the current project, the ECHO project that we're currently implementing, started off in 2021 and will be coming to a gentle end this coming month in 2023, June 2023. And we operate in Leribe, Tabaseka, and Mogotlong. Mogotlong being the urban council, Leribe being Bolata and Mazoku, whilst Tabaseka we operate in Khutlosimesi as well as Bokong councils. Now, at community level, we train and capacitate village disaster management teams on disaster risk reduction and management, as well as provide them with early warning tools or systems they could use. This is why, even after we have trained BDMTs per se, we also help them to come up with what's called the Community Disaster Preparedness Plan, or a CDPP. This is a document in which the community on its own begin to appreciate the common hazards, or those that they could face, their shortcomings, as well as the strengths that they have, in order to mitigate, to prepare for, and respond during crisis and disasters. Moreover, we also build capacity and train children to develop and simulate the school response plans based on the hazards and shocks in the areas. This we do by firstly training teachers on disaster risk reduction, and then those teachers will begin to monitor the school clubs. We have the disaster risk reduction clubs in schools. The essence is that from an early age, the child should be well-versed, should be knowledgeable, and should appreciate the nature in which they live in, but also to prepare for those disasters. So that means we, in a community, or where we, in those councils where we operate in, a community has its own preparedness plan, and the school has its own preparedness plan. And our hope is that ultimately this will be passed on and also be ensured that it's sustained where we have started, but also passed on and transmitted throughout the whole nation.
So, Thapelo, why is it also important that Lesotho adopts a multi-sectoral approach in disaster risk reduction and management?
Okay. One of the things which we want to avoid as World Vision is working in silos, especially in emergency situations. We want to collaborate with other stakeholders, with other partners, so that our collaborations have a broader impact, because we all have different resources, be it human resources, knowledge resources, be it physical resources, financial resources. We are all gifted differently. But if we collaborate, we will be able to have a broader impact, a deepened impact, and a sustainable and well-monitored activity. So we want to ensure that we have broader impact as well as collaboration. But what we also want to avoid is duplication of efforts. There is nothing as embarrassing as when we have an emergency situation and we find that people who could have collaborated chose not to collaborate or missed the opportunity to collaborate. And now they're duplicating efforts, whereas if they had elaborated, the efforts would have been far much more impactful and made a better impact.
Indeed. Dr. Pero, that's a very, very important point right there. Now, say the government does enact the Disaster Risk Management Bill into law. How will this aid the communities vulnerable to and affected by the disaster?
One of the things I wish to shed light on is to appreciate the merits of the bill. Once we begin to appreciate the merits of the bill, as well as contrasting it to the former law or to the current law that we have, we will then begin to see how this bill will ensure that the most vulnerable are indeed elevated. For one, it comes up with what's called an emergency operation center, a disaster emergency task force, disaster risk insurance, and public compensation schemes. Like currently, if you are to be hit by a disaster in your house, a natural phenomenon question is, do we even know, do we even understand the insurance which we have to have? Do we even know the procedures we have to follow to even get that compensation? So that law now begins to build up that which we want to have here. So another thing that it also brings forth, it now incorporates the village disaster management teams, which were otherwise, I believe, were enacted through the Electoral Act of 2005, the local government bill, in fact, the local government Act of 2005, because in the 1998 DMA bill, they did not exist. Now, this time, everything that says disaster risk reduction is now housed under one law. So what does that mean for the whole country? It means that when we budget, we now know holistically what we want to budget on, what we want to budget for, and the SASI will be doing it very efficiently and very effectively. What we'll also do is to streamline disasters or disaster management across ministries and into our line of work. We want to streamline it, ensure that there is clear coordination, there is smooth operations, and perhaps incorporate some of the lessons learned from how we responded to past disasters. Perhaps even to make an example, we could take lessons learned from how we responded from COVID-19. What did we get wrong? What did we get right? And how best we incorporate that such that in future we don't make the same mistake.
Yeah. Now, as we wrap up under the Tapelo, let's talk about the long-term plans. With the resources in line with the Sendai framework to implement the short and medium-term commitments, as you've previously mentioned, what are the long-term plans that are being implemented now?
Thank you very much. What I want us to appreciate also before I delve much into your question is that the Sendai framework was established or signed throughout the world as an international convention in 2015, hoping to start from 2015 to 2030. Now, in 2023, I think we are midway through the Sendai framework. But for us as a country, Lesotho, we only ratified it into Lesotho National Disaster Risk Reduction Strategy and Action Plan of 2019. That's when we began to have it. And that's when we begin to adopt or synthesize the Sendai framework priorities, the 4 priorities of the Sendai framework into our own and began to appreciate it. Now, perhaps to talk about long-term commitments that the country has on them, we want to appreciate that the Sendai framework in fact, the National Disaster Risk Reduction Strategy and Action Plan operates at national level and community level. So there are two types of activities that are going on under the 4 priorities. Now let's talk about understanding risk. In fact, the first priority being understanding risk. When we understand risk, that means everyone is informed by sensitization. We now begin to appreciate what disasters are. Are we really there yet? How do we get there yet? So this project currently is helping the country to ensure that the BDMTs, the students, the communities understand the risks they face in their own areas. Secondly, or the second priority is strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. So what we're trying to do is all the frameworks. This is why we want to advocate, or we are advocating for the disaster risk reduction and management bill to be passed, is because what we want to do is that all institutions, everything that says disaster risk reduction and management is housed under one law, under one policy, such that it is spearheaded. It's very narrow and it hits where we want it to hit. So we want to ensure that the governance of disasters in the country is well managed, well structured, and well thought out throughout the whole thing. The third being investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. What we want to ensure is that there is funding. You know, one of the sad things that we as a country begin to realize is that we do not have funding or contingency funding in case there is a disaster that's about to hit us or that is hitting us. And so what we want to do is call upon humanitarian actors as well as government and all relevant stakeholders that let's have funding that will ensure that should a disaster hit, we have funding readily available to respond. And maybe the last two are enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So what, in essence, in the long term, what we're hoping the government to achieve is that we are able to plan effectively. We appreciate all the hazards and shocks that could hit us. If I were to make an example, let me give you an example that's about to hit us or that has been forecasted. This year, we know that from October through to December, we're expecting dry conditions because of the El Nino. Question is, are we prepared for that? Have we mobilized enough resources such that we absorb all the shocks that come with that drought that has been forecasted? So this project is trying to ensure that let's plan ahead. Let nothing be a surprise. At least if it's a surprise, we should say we did not have capacity, we did not know about it, and perhaps we lacked in a certain way. But for things that we can predict, we can work on. So let's invest on them, especially to ensure that our children also participate and people living with disabilities. One of the things we do is we tend to forget people with disabilities and our children. It is our duty that as we do every activity, we include them.
Well, that's well articulated, if I should say so myself. You should have yourself a great evening, and thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely afternoon to you and your listeners. But I would love to leave you with one question. When are we beginning to prepare for all shocks and hazards that can face us, either locally or as a nation? In your village, in your house, do you have a quick run back? How can you prepare for disasters if your own household is not prepared? So let us all run behind that and ensure that indeed we are prepared. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Thank you very much, Ndati.